Hi, dear friends, a short Torah idea for Parshat Tetzaveh. You know, we say in the Bameh Madlikin, which is a recital of the second chapter of the Mishnah of Masechet Shabbat, we talk about what can be used as the fuel for the Shabbos candles and what can be used for its wicks. And the Talmud tells us something interesting, that whatever can be used for wicks, for Shabbat candles, is also the restriction for what can be used in the temple to light the menorah. And this leads the Talmud in Tractate Shabbat to a discussion of how they used to light the menorah. What kind of wicks did they use? Now, you would have thought that they would have used brand new wicks, the most honorable way to light the menorah in the temple. But the Talmud tells us something really quite astounding, and that is that in the temple, they would take out the worn out breeches of the Kohanim, which were made from linen, which is one of the ingredients that is kosher to use for wicks for lighting Shabbat candles in the menorah. And they would take those worn out breeches that could no longer be worn by the Kohanim because they were worn out or dirty, and they would cut them up into small pieces and roll them into wicks, and that's how they would light the menorah. This is very unusual because normally we say, especially when it comes to temple service, ein aniyut b'makom ashirut, that we spare no expense in making sure that the temple service is done in the most beautiful and dignified manner. We try not to recycle when it comes to temple service if the quality of that service will be compromised because we're using something old. So the question that we have to ask is, why specifically were the pants of the Kohen used as wicks? And here's an interesting thing. If you look at the Torah says that the purpose of the michnasayim, these breeches that the Kohanim wore, is lechasot bisar erva, as it says in our Parsha. They were to cover up some type of nakedness. That's the simple import of what the purpose of these breeches were, for the purpose of modesty. But I think it speaks to something much deeper than just covering up physical nakedness. There's a spiritual and emotional nakedness as well. And here's where I'd like to quote the Zohar, because the Zohar tells us really something quite fascinating. There is a mitzvah that is mentioned by King David, Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha. You have to worship God with joy. And the Zohar then asks the question, how is it that Jews are serving God with joy when they come to the temple to bring their sacrifices? After all, think of the person who's coming to the temple to bring a korban, to bring a sacrifice. He's usually bringing it for the purpose of atoning for sin, at least part of the time, if not most of the time, that's the case. Imagine the person who's had to schlep all the way to Jerusalem to make a pilgrimage because he feels tremendous remorse, he feels terrible over some crime he's committed. He's not going to be strolling in with his head held up high, whistling a tune with a smile on his face. He's going to be of broken and contrite spirit. And the Zohar then asks the question, how could that type of broken spirit be acceptable to God if a person has to serve God with joy? And the Zohar answers with a very straightforward answer. It says, you're right. It's not possible for a contrite and penitent individual to be filled with joy. But that's the reason why the Kohanim and the Leviim are present in the temple. The Kohen is in a perpetual state of joy when he's working in the temple. He and the Levite who accompanies him have to always greet every single parishioner who comes to the temple with a smile, give them the reassurance that God loves them and that everything's going to be all right because they've come to make amends and to connect once again with their Maker. And that's the way the Zohar describes the role of the Kohen, the person who is perpetually in a state of joy. He takes that joy and he appends it to the mitzvah that is being done by the penitent and broken individual, and that is how that service, that worship is done with joy, not through the individual's heart, but through the heart of the Kohen. Now I want you to think about that Kohen. Imagine a Kohen, when he's not working in the temple, is having some kind of difficulty in his home. He may have gotten into an argument with his wife. He may have God forbid, a sick child at home. He may have financial stresses that he's having difficulty dealing with. He may have a bout of depression or some other kind of mental illness which is weighing very heavily upon him. Now imagine how he needs to be able to put all of that aside as soon as he comes into the temple and be able to greet every person with a smile and instill every broken parishioner with that sense of confidence and love. It's not an easy task, but that's perhaps what the Torah means when it says that the Kohen must wear a uniform to cover up his own nakedness, to cover up the raw emotions that he's feeling inside, that he cannot afford to show to the public, because sometimes it's more important for me to take care of others' needs than it is to take care of my own emotional needs. And with this being the idea, perhaps that's why the Torah wants us to light the menorah with the britches and make them into wicks for the menorah. Because the way you bring light into the world is by not focusing on your own problems, but sometimes necessarily covering them over so that you can help take care of others. And if you and I accomplish that, then we are accomplishing the role of the Kohen in the temple, ministering unto others, and in so doing, contributing to the light that the menorah represents, the light that we bring to the world. Let's hope that the world sees a lot more light over the next days. God knows we surely need that light. Here's wishing you a beautiful Shabbos. Shabbat Shalom.